What's going on, Badger Nation? Welcome to the PPC Den podcast, your home for all things PPC tips, tricks, and strategies to make your Amazon advertising a little bit easier and a little bit more profitable. Today, I'm joined by good friend of the show, Adam from Better AMS, and we sort of talk about how to get the most out of the summer, which is generally a pretty slow time, especially in summer 2023. We give you some good mindset and some good tactics come from that episode. You can get a full list of many of our episodes at the link in the description. We have a Google Sheet where you can look at our episodes, and they've been organized and categorized for you, which you can tap into our wealth of info from the last 250 episodes, all about Amazon advertising. If you'd like to learn more about what we do professionally, we have the Amazon advertising software, which you can also check out in the description below. Have a good one, and I'll see you inside the Badger Den.
I've launched campaigns and picked keywords. I've got my bids, set placements too, and bad mistakes. I've made a few. I've had my share of wrong keywords, but I've come through. We are the PPC Den, my friends, and we'll keep optimizing to the end. You two are the PPC Den. We talk about Amazon. No time for manicures, 'cause we fix the gambits of the world.
Welcome back to the show. One of the friendliest people we have on the show, Adam from Better AMS. Adam, it's so nice to see you. I feel like I'm picking up on your Pacific Northwest energy, and I feel a little bit more relaxed now talking to you.
That is great to hear, and not the first time I've gotten that,
Mhm.
but it is an absolute pleasure to be on the show again. Thoroughly enjoyed our first episode, and really looking forward to having this conversation.
I've got a lot of fast-paced, red line, New Jersey energy, even though I haven't lived there in 10 years. What can I learn from the rivers and mountains of Oregon?
You know, as someone who grew up just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I think I definitely understand where you're coming from there, but living out here certainly helps slow things down and kind of put things into perspective when you're spending a lot of time in the wilderness alone or with your loved ones. So it's a great dynamic.
You spent time in the wilderness alone. Have you ever been like solo camping? Is that what you're
I
referring to?
have I have been solo camping, not in quite a while, but yeah, historically when I was a younger man.
Have you done like multi-day hikes, camp out in the wilderness? You have.
We have, yes. That will elect to do with a group
Yeah.
naturally.
hmm What's harder, camping out in the wilderness or optimizing Amazon PPC campaigns in the middle of the summer?
What a question. Well, just for weather's sake, I'm going to elect to say probably optimizing PPC campaigns in the middle of the summer.
I agree. I think optimizing PPC campaigns in the middle of the summer is way harder than just going camping under any circumstances. I'd probably say I can do a multi-day hike into the mountain and come back more with less stress than explaining the post Prime Day, middle of the summer slump. Is that the name?
I would
Is
agree.
that what we're calling it?
Yeah. Let's refer to it as a slump that we are working ourselves out of slowly.
And this is an interesting time too, for the American economy too. And I always try to say, the American economy can do whatever, and it's the global economy can do whatever. It's more so an exercise in, well, what can we do? What do we have control over? And the things that we have control over, are the bits and pieces of campaigns that I'm sure we'll get to today, different strategy, different mindset today. And I heard this amazing quote by a coach I had one time. It wasn't more so a quote, more so a mindset. He's like, slowdowns are inevitable. And if you can go faster than your competition during a slowdown, when the slowdown is over, your clock speed will be much faster. Your pace when the race, when lap 2 begins, you'll already be ahead of other people and you'll be moving faster. And that was always really interesting. He mentioned that during COVID, where it's like, hey, like now's the time to double down and go faster and more furious. And you won't be going as fast as if, maybe the economy was good, but you're going to be going faster than your competition. And I think that was like a really useful thing I heard, that even when it feels like we're sort of stuck in the mud, as long as you keep moving forward, if some of these global forces are acting on you, they're probably acting on other people too. So I always thought that was an interesting concept. Shout out to Dan Martell, who said that.
Beautiful, beautiful quote. And
Yeah.
I largely agree. I think maintaining a positive attitude and focusing on what you can do to counteract, that sort of slump and that sort of imbalance through rougher times. Largely we see success with brands after the slump, who have really doubled down and focused on strategies that are working and continuing to promote their products even through, periods like the summer where, it's no surprise that things are a bit slower post Prime Day, at least.
So let's start to talk about this. So we want to be able to, go faster than our competition, even during times of slowdown. Before we even get to some of the strategies, I'm curious to, like, let's put some context around this. Like, what do you define as sort of a post Prime Day or summer slump? What kinds of things are you seeing? Before we start talking about solutions, let's sort of talk more about, I guess, the problem that the solutions, are generated from.
Yeah, yeah. So, I think the way I think of PPC quite often is it's a reflection of a lot of different aspects of Amazon, right? And also the economy. So it's a reflection of how optimized your listings are and your title and your product detail or your bullet points and your imagery, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also a reflection of buyer activity. And that is swayed directly by economic factors, right? So naturally, when we're looking year over year post COVID, a lot of brands are down. And you dive into metrics such as conversion rate month over month in 2023, average daily sales in 2023. And largely what we were seeing post Prime Day is a lot of brands were down naturally. So I think that, that's more or less what I would describe as the challenges that a lot of brands were facing early into the summer.
And when you say down, I'm looking at, average ACOS for about 1,100 accounts. And, on Prime Day, it dropped a lot. For comparison, on July 11th, the average was like 21%. 2 days earlier, it was 35%. 2 days after Prime Day was back to 35%, which is considered high for that many accounts all at once. So that if that's the average, that means some people are above and below that. So that's generally pretty high. And in terms of one thing I think is interesting is revenue per click. So again, this is across like, I don't know, maybe 5 million clicks over a couple of days. It's like, okay, revenue per click 2 days before Prime Day, 286 on Prime Day, 541. So that's the amount of revenue coming in per click. 2 days after, 287, like back down. A couple of days after that, 275 compared to like the Prime Day peak at 541. Right. So yeah, so this July, I think across the board, I think it would be surprising, especially long-term brands that are well established. I think it would be almost a little surprising to see this July to be considered like great. I think that would, like if you consider it great, like you're one of the lucky ones. And I also think compared to 2022, it might be lagging behind 2022. I don't know for certain, but I would, if you asked me to guess, I would guess it would be, almost considered normal to be maybe down from 2022
Yeah,
versus 2023.
yeah, I would largely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that consumers certainly had increased buying power pre 2023, and we're kind of seeing the fallout of that directly related to metrics. That combined with ever increasing advertising costs,
Right.
that's a tough equation to solve for sure.
So we've got the slump. What are some things that when you look at this, what are some things that we can do to sort of take back control and begin to make our accounts as good as they can be, and especially also outpace the competition, outmaneuver the rest of our competitors?
Yeah. So, I think it truly comes down to high level fundamentals, right? Where if you have ineffective bid ops, you're not going to see bid down changes relative to conversion rate, relative to trending ACOS. And you're naturally going to see, you know, likely a decline in performance. I think that's generally what we're looking at across the board at this point, post Prime Day, and ultimately pre Prime Day as well. But as far as things that we can do as advertisers to kind of help you work through that slump are to capitalize on things like Prime Day, increase in traffic, deals that we're running that are driving a ton of traffic to PDPs during event, and kind of working to recapitalize post event instead of letting that traffic fizzle out into the distance and kind of dissipate. So, it's certainly a balance, but we're finding that the majority of brands who really work to capitalize on lead in strategy post Prime Day, promote their products, almost set aside a percentage of budget for pre Prime Day promotion, essentially top of funnel strategies. We're seeing just better return, better conversion rate, better sales velocity post Prime Day. Although it is hard to keep up, of course, as we stretch away from that deal or of that date. So.
Mm-hmm. So just pulling out a couple of things in there. Are you referring to sort of like when you're saying like promotions ahead of time? I'd be curious to talk to me a little bit about your bidding and budget strategies during sort of going out of Prime Day, going into the rest of the summer.
Yeah. So high level, very naturally, post Prime Day, leading up to Prime Day, we saw, you know, substantial increase in cost per click as competitors ramped up their ads in preparation for Prime Day. Um, CPC naturally high during the event, and then almost immediately thereafter, we see a pretty sharp decrease, right? And in not only cost per click, but also conversion rate, account wide and at the product level. So, I think understanding consumer behavior post event is really important relative to what you're doing with your bids and campaign budgets ultimately. So, what we've been doing is kind of painting the expectation that, look, a decrease in conversion and a decrease in sales velocity post Prime Day is natural, or post event or post holiday or what have you is completely natural. Here's how we're going to counteract that decrease. And a lot of times I would say most of the time, it's completely fundamental. It's proper budget allocation to strategies that are working. It's pulling back on the more high risk, top of funnel awareness based strategies. And it's also properly optimizing bids. It's, making sure that our highest converting keywords bids remain optimal for our target level ACOS. And it's also making sure that, on the other side, keywords that are, potentially trending upward in terms of ACOS, you naturally knock the bid down. You kind of let things run and be sure not to optimize during, looking back at the date range. You want to exclude Prime Day naturally. So again, I think that kind of ties back to just understanding what's going on in the world right now, and ultimately how consumer behavior changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always think it's frustrating, or it's always challenging to look back and have that window. Oh, I'm going to optimize my bids based off a past certain time frame, and then of course have that time frame include Prime Day. So that's sort of to leave a technique of sort of when you're thinking about bidding, you want to consider different timeframes and sort of the trend of those timeframes. What is it doing in the last 7 days? What is it doing in the last 14, 30 days? I think that gives you the most accurate view of what a bid and budget should be. And it's even more challenging to give people sort of a mindset shift here too. Is a lot of times when we set bids, we're looking back in time. You sort of mentioned it here too, of, well, you can also sort of try to predict where it will go. So you sort of already know that after Prime Day, the conversion rate is probably going to fall a bit. Probably you'll see the lowest day of conversion rate for the entire month on the day after Prime Day. And then it will probably stay a little low for at least some time before it begins to stabilize again. Like I'm seeing, Prime Day ended on July 12th and July 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. 17th, it finally started to get back to what looked like a July average. So when you have that information, knowing, and this happens every single year, I looked back and I've done, I want to say 5 Amazon PPC Prime Day, how to prepare, and like looking back at the data, and it's always the same every single year. So we can sort of understand this and sort of go into our campaigns and know what to do with regards to bidding and budget, which is like, you want to look back in time. You want to be sure you're looking at the right time frames. You also want to get prepared for, a conversion rate jump of, in some cases, 30, 40%. And then you want to be, from there, a decrease of, maybe 40% down. And like your bids should be sort of reflective of what that is. So like maintaining ACOS, maintaining profitability, not throwing in the towel, trying to get as many sales as you can. You help accomplish that and keep your figures in an acceptable range through bidding and budget management. It's one of my favorite activities.
Absolutely. And, it's certainly difficult when you're working with such a short date range post Prime Day, right? Where many brands want to see that immediate change the day after. Okay, the event's over, time to decrease bids and budgets pretty aggressively. And naturally, what we see again post event is a decrease in conversion rate, even at lesser ad spend, significantly lesser ad spend than the event. And naturally, with that comes a slightly higher ACOS. And I think, there are multiple facets of being an advertiser or working in advertising, and one of those facets is going to be data explanation, or kind of painting a picture as to why things happen, right? So one of the common mistakes that I find, especially in this industry, is that a lot of advertisers will kind of run blind not into Prime Day, but we'll prepare for Prime Day. We'll paint the picture that, okay, we're going to see an increase in traffic, an increase naturally in spend and sales, likely an increase in conversion rate, and a decrease in ACOS. And what they forget to include is the post Prime Day shift in buyer activity, and ultimately how that's going to be reflected in your data and your performance. I think a lot of advertisers are very good at painting that picture holistically, but it's on a brand to brand basis, and it certainly depends on strategies leading up to Prime Day, strategies post Prime Day. So it's a tough dynamic, but just ensuring that communications is key, around this time is going to make your life a lot easier.
So if you were to get an email and it's like, hey, we're down year over year, July 2023 versus July 2022, it would be really nice to be up year over year in August. What are you sort of suggesting at that point? Like, how do we make maybe August stronger?
Right. I think I would, almost elect to put the ball back in their court and kind of gain more clarification on that question, right? What are you willing to sacrifice to be up year over year? If ad costs are more expensive, CPC naturally is more expensive at this point, sales velocity is down a bit year over year, we can push hard, but it will be at the expense of, potentially higher average daily spend, potentially higher total ACOS. So I think, ad strategy combined with natural economic factors is certainly key. Yeah. I think that, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, that's almost like uh, the wrong question to ask. Like, what do we do to be up year over year for August? I think
Right.
determining how you want to be up is, I think, an interesting question. Meaning, do we want a better ACOS than we did in the previous year? Do we want a better total ACOS than we want in the previous year? Do we want more orders that we had in the previous year? Do we want a bigger percentage share of voice than the previous year? You know, how we're doing versus the competition. And, you know, a lot of times you do have to make those trade-offs of like, well, we want to optimize for ACOS this year. So like, let's get a better ACOS this year than the previous year. Or we want more orders this year than the previous year. So as you say yes to some, you sometimes have to say no to others.
Yeah, I would largely say that. Absolutely.
And it's almost like, well, you know, you mentioned, look, what are you willing to sacrifice? So I think we can sort of tease out some of these ideas of, you know, what if someone does simply want that? They want to increase their brand percentage, like they want a better share of voice. They want to, we know that the market might be a little bit smaller. You know, maybe there's less search volume, maybe there's fewer orders, whatever. And they just sort of want to say, I want at least a bigger percentage, you know, using that mindset of if I can just grab a bigger percentage now, that's really going to pay off in Q4.
Hmm.
So what are some sort of like grab more share of voice or grab more, you know, share of orders to outpace competition?
Yeah. So that is an excellent question.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is something to be said about allocating a decent percentage of your budget towards ranking strategies if market share ultimately is the KPI of your choice, and that's what you're looking to achieve. Right now in July 2023, something that we are focusing on, especially across brands where we're seeing a decline naturally in conversion rate post Prime Day, is going to be long tail expansion across broad phrase and exact, low CPC, incremental sales increases. You're able to keep your ad spend low across a lot of those terms because search volume is so low. But what a lot of brands and a lot of advertisers kind of leave off of that subject is that incrementality there is the name of the game, right? Your products are only as good as the eyes that are upon them. So, if you have 5,000 additional long tail keywords that you're going after with a cost per click of 40 cents, you can afford to run those campaigns at a lesser conversion rate naturally than you are your high CPC keywords or your ranking keywords or what have you. So, I kind of point in the direction of ad type expansion or low risk ad type expansion at this point in the year.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Ad type expansion, long tail expansion. Even today, I will open up accounts sometimes and see, oh, wow, they're not running sponsored brands. And it's like easy pickup there. So that's incredibly common. We've done episodes of the show before that it's like the 34 campaigns to launch for a product. And it's just like all the different nooks and crannies of campaigns that you could launch, competitor branded terms, competitor product page, sponsored display targets, competitor this, branded terms, generalized terms, like all the different ideas of and buckets that can be launched for a single thing is a really long list. So that allows you to grab more share on those searches. I also want to mention one thing I think is becoming more valuable is like, okay, if a keyword gets searched, all the keywords that could ever apply to this product gets searched 100,000 times a month. You have to fight over that 100,000 search volume with all your other competitors. And I think one thing that I'm seeing work better and better is actually being like, okay, like if it gets searched 100,000 times over there's like people on Google searching this too. Like, let me start running Google ads to Amazon and like turn that on. And like now all of a sudden I'm competing for searches that maybe just my only on Amazon people are not searching for. Or like maybe it's time for me to invest in an email list where I can like take that email list. So maybe we want to run some off Amazon traffic to build an email list. And then during like a post Prime Day slump, it's like, boom, fire away an email promotion like, oh, did you miss our Prime Day deal? Here's this. I've seen that work really well. Other examples, influencer based traffic, where it's like, oh, now all of a sudden I'm not even competing on the Google searches. I'm competing against another potentially untapped traffic source that my competitors aren't tapping into. So I think this sort of bucket, I think the easiest thing for a PPCer to adapt to is learn how to launch Google Ads to Amazon. So I've really enjoyed. I've been doing a lot of experiments with that over the last few months, and it's pretty sick. I really like it. It's part of the same thing. It's right. I have this product.
Right.
What are additional ways I can put this in front of people? Every single campaign type, every single ad type on Amazon, and then other things outside of that, which is why Amazon's creating new ad products and new ad placements and evolving this, because it's like you can put the same ad in more places. So like you need that early mover advantage of all these ad types on Amazon. And then also, hey, there's like many places to get traffic on the internet.
I would agree. I think the newest sponsored brand format is generally a reflection of exactly what you're describing with, how we now have 4 brands advertising 3 products at the top of search. And Amazon's kind of leaving it up to the consumer to engage, across those different brands, and ultimately make a selection, based on what problem they're trying to solve or what product they're trying to find. So increase in placement, absolutely. I'm curious to see what that does for sponsored brand investment moving forward, especially with big brands who generally dominate that placement, right? So, things are changing quickly in Amazon as always, but that's the beauty of advertising, is that you have to adapt and survive.
Yeah. And, we started this question by saying, like, what can we do to improve like our market share against our competition? And, we mentioned launching new campaign types. And what's your general, like, in a time of sort of a slump, like how aggressive do you think advertisers should be at increasing that budget, where it's like, oh, wait a second, I'm going to be smaller than I am last year, and I have to like advertise more, like I need more campaigns being launched. How do you think about budget allocation during this time?
Yeah. So, I think of strategies in terms of risk at periods
Mm-hmm.
like this in the year, where in Q3 and Q4 we can allocate a higher percentage of our budget to ultimately ranking strategies, high CPC
Mm-hmm.
strategies, because we naturally see an increase in conversion rate at that time, an increase in traffic, an increase in sales. Um, During this time, it's going to depend completely on how aggressive you are willing to be to outpace your competition. But as far as just general risk in the summer, the dog days of summer, certainly late July post event,
Mm.
we're finding that a lot of brands are shifting that mentality back to profitability, just to ultimately preserve margin until that peak time in Q3, end of Q3, late early Q4. So right now, I think budget segmentation is very important. At a product level, it's important to know what percentage of your budget is going towards ranking strategies, what percentage of your budget is going towards profitability-based strategies, awareness-based strategies, et cetera, et cetera. So I think just understanding where your money is going to help you work through times like these, especially post-event, when things are changing rapidly.
Let's get down in the weeds. How can someone keep track of their budget allocation in all those different types of things? Like on a day-to-day basis, how do you keep track of, oh, I'm spending this much on ranking strategies? And then on
Mhm.
top of that, let's start there. How do you like to keep track of that?
Yeah, so it ultimately comes down to sound nomenclature. There's a ton of ways that you can do this via campaign tagging across different softwares and what have you. But for this example, I'm going to remain in the ad console,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's where a lot of people, a lot of advertisers work directly out of. So, I think campaign nomenclature, and proper campaign build is going to be key, right? If you're overloading campaigns with 500 targets, you're not going to be able to properly optimize that campaign, because there's going to be 500 targets spending in one campaign, right? Um, so I think of it in terms of segmenting out budget based on marketing funnel, and a lot of times we'll do that via nomenclature, via portfolio. I know across a lot of my managed brands, we have product level portfolios for branded keyword targeting, for profitability based targeting, rest of search, for top of search impression share based targeting, et cetera, et cetera. So ultimately keeping a fine line between those strategies directly in the ad console is going to help. It's going to go a long way in terms of where your money is going and the adjustments that you can make to kind of counteract exactly what we're talking about, right? Where conversion rate is naturally decreasing at this time. So you're going to be able to see exactly where that's happening in your strategies.
If you had to predict, naming the campaigns properly, and if you had to predict like an idealized budget allocation percentage for the dog days of summer, and what would you say? What would you say like percentage of budget across like different kinds of campaigns would you be maybe again just sort of if you were writing a textbook and you're like
Mm-hmm.
budget allocation for post Prime Day summer slump, how would you think about budgeting?
I would stress the fact that this is completely situational, brand to
Of
brand and
course,
category to category.
yeah,
Full disclaimer there. But, ultimately, I think when you're always reacting based on a trend, right? Or, being proactive based on an expected trend. So, let's talk pre Prime Day and budget allocation there. Naturally, we're going to want to build up visibility post event. And that's going to happen through top of search, rank focus strategies, and awareness based strategies. So naturally, pre event, you're going to have a higher percentage of budget going towards those strategies. Whereas post event, the majority of brands are seeing, again, for the fifth or sixth time, a natural decrease in conversion rate and ultimately sales. So naturally, we're going to want to kind of reshift focus back towards profitability based strategies. There's not going to be as many consumers at this point in the year post event who are not brand loyal and are looking for any product under the sun to try and test, especially post event. So we have seen rollback as far as high CPC strategies that we're seeing decreases in conversion rate across. Right now, we're really doubling down on profitability, kind of working to maintain margin leading up to Q3 and Q4. And I think a good reflection of the work that you do pre, post event or pre, during, and post event is going to be your branded search volume, right? With our brands that invested lead in strategy and we saw a big jump during Prime Day, naturally what we're seeing post event is a slight increase in branded search volume.
Mm.
So I think that's ultimately a strong reflection of how effective your lead in strategies are.
So I think what I heard there is really, and I agree with this in general, of whatever your current budget allocation percentages are, you use that as a baseline, and then you
Mhm.
say, well, what's my result of all this budget allocation? Does anything need to get changed? So if you look at it and you're like, wow, I'm only spending 1% of my budget on ranking strategies, and I'm ranking really poorly. It's like, okay, let's pull that up. That's actually a great idea for an episode. Okay, maybe next time. Is there any other question talking about sort of how to make the most of the summer slump that you wished I asked today?
As far as a question about a question, that's interesting.
Yes.
I don't think so, Michael. The only other thing I can think of, the only other aspect of post event I can think of would be to capitalize on the influx of new to brand customers
Mm.
to your brand. So, especially across consumables, repeat purchase items, there's going to be some levers you can pull there to kind of capitalize on, the amount of consumers who are coming in and purchasing products for the first time, um, and who may be apt to purchase again or purchase a different product from your brand. I know for myself, I recently have gotten hooked on Oats Overnight.
Mm.
That is just a wonderful product. And during event, I had gone back in, taken a look at their listings and their products, and ultimately decided to try something else. So, I think there's a lot to be said for remaining top of mind, especially across consumers that have tried your product for the first time and, um, you know, are thoroughly enjoying it. So
Yeah.
there's a lot you can do there.
Well said. Well, Adam from Better AMS, thank you so much for joining us back here on the PPC Den podcast. Um, you know, summer slump, it's hard out there, but I think like the mindset of like, what can we do to outpace the competition now so that when we do have tailwind. We're going the fastest. I think that's the right mindset to have. And some of the things that we talked about campaign type expansion, great reminder. I think it's a great time for off Amazon traffic. I think it's a great time to look at your budget allocation and ask yourself, is this the budget allocation that will get me my ultimate goal? Spending more time thinking about what your ultimate goal is for August, September, so that you're going into, you're getting where you want to get to, poised for success in Q4. Adam, any final words? What are you doing in Oregon this weekend?
This weekend, for once, I have no agenda, so it's
Nice.
it's going to be nice. We're going to spend some time on the water here and just enjoy the sun. But
Right.
as far as some final words, just Amazon based. There's always going to be there are always going to be factors working against you in Amazon, right? And using those factors as an excuse for poor performance, I don't think is acceptable. You always need to be conveying the things that you can do to counteract what's going on in the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think remaining positive, remaining calculated with the decisions you make, and ultimately painting the proper picture to your brands on what's going on is going to be key, and it's going to help you carry yourself and your brands through times like this.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, Michael. Always a pleasure.